Of course, we've got our moderator from the BFG today, Jason Poole, and he'll lead us through the evening. But I'd really like to just welcome our distinguished panellists here today, and I'll go from far to near. We've got Steve Meyn, and Steve's well known to us, in Hunternet especially, the Managing Director of PKF Lawler and Director of PKF Asia Pacific. And Steve, as I say, has had a great relationship with Hunternet over the years. And in particular, Steve is involved with, he's had 24 years of accounting experience as a specific expertise in the field of IT consulting. So Steve actually heads up as a chair our IT forum within Hunternet. So we're very thankful that Steve provides his time to do that. Or also in the middle, I'd like to introduce Lyndell Fogarty. Lyndell's the Chief Executive for PerformHR, and she's a current Hunternet Director. And Lyndell was the co-founder of PerformHR, who are doing some very interesting things and changing the way that people look at HR. And I would say that she's a dynamic and fearless entrepreneur. Yay! And so she's built some great HR service models and outsourcing models, and of particular interest, she's been involved with the insurance industry, and she's provided some real innovative solutions in that industry. And of course, how do you introduce Neville Sawyer? That's always a challenge for anybody. Now, Neville. If I talk about Hunternet briefly, Neville was very important in the instigation and development of Hunternet in its early years. It was Neville who decided that we needed to pick the benchmark up in manufacturing here and educate our manufacturers and invite the professionals in our city here and the university into Hunternet. So that remains the same today. Of course, he's a past director and held numerous directorships. We know about his role with HMRI, of course. He's always been interested in the development of new companies and their innovations, very much involved with Hunter Angels. And of course, he was one of the founders of Ampcontrol, and we know the great story there. Currently President of TAFE New South Wales in Newcastle, and Director of Lake Macquarie Business Growth Centre. So everybody, can we please welcome our... So I'd like to just now put it right over to Jason to take us through the evening. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Carl. Welcome everybody. It's great to see you all here, and really appreciate you making the effort to be here and giving us your time. Appreciate that you had a choice to be somewhere else, so let's hope that we all get something out of this. What we've found previously, this is a forum. It's not a lecture, it's not a presentation, and the best forums we've had is where everybody participates. So if you have a query or a question or a point of order, you get a bit excited, please try and get my attention. I'll be looking and I'll bring you in as quickly as we can, but it's really just a Q&A, and we're all here to share. If you get absolutely desperate, I can't see you, just stand up, and then I'll definitely know that I'll come to you quickly. Just a couple of quick numbers. At the end of last year in Australia, there were 40,000 SMEs for sale in Australia. Over 1 million business owners are heading for retirement or exit in Australia right now. And there's this lack of balance between the sellers and the buyers, and unfortunately the sellers at the moment, their expectations are lowering. There's obviously this overcrowding effect, and so it made us kind of think, well, look at other avenues, and one of the questions is, how do you find the buyer, and where would the right buyer come from? And one of the potential areas is possibly already in somebody or a team within your existing business. Don't panic, this is not a retirement session. There's quite a lot of young people here, like myself. And it's the vein that I'm thinking here is, my dad from a very young age, about 5 or 6, has always said to me, you should always run your business as if you're going to sell it either tomorrow or maybe next week. Make sure you've got a business plan, a marketing plan, you know your numbers backwards, and that they're up to date. You've got the best systems, the best people you can possibly have. Doesn't mean you're going to sell tomorrow or next month, but if you do that, you attract the sort of people who you want, and you can also develop along the way. So with that in mind, I'll start with Lyndell and ask, this all sounds lovely, how do we go about identifying future leaders in your view?
Yes, I run a HR company, but I'm also a business owner. So the things that I'm going to share with you are things that I look at, to advise clients around. They're also things that I need to put into practice myself. So started PerformHR 6 years ago with a very clear objective, and that is to build a saleable entity. So every decision that's made around that is with that context in mind. The question you asked me, Jason, was how do you identify your leaders or your future leaders, I think, more pointedly, yeah. Well, there's two types of leaders. There's your caretakers, and then there's your drivers. So you first of all really need to decide, well, what am I replacing, or what is it that I need to get the objective? So am I looking at selling? Am I looking at a buyer within, or am I looking at setting it up so that I can go and sit margaritas on the beach? So you need to understand, well, what type of leader or leaders do I need? Do I need people just to step in and take care of a role that's well established and keep the things ticking along, or do I need people who can go and drive? So in terms of how you do that, there's different models available to you, but the key is you've got to understand what it is that you're looking for. So is it a driver or is it a caretaker?
Okay. So imagine you've identified a driver, and how do you keep them interested without relinquishing control, at least initially?
Yeah. Well, when you've identified them, I think the critical thing to identifying a driver is I ask a lot of questions. They're really interested. So I believe most of the people in this room own a business. So think about yourself when you were looking at establishing your own business or taking a leader role. What is it that you were personally looking for? I was that pesky person that asked a lot of questions, and I remember the best pearl of advice I was given as a grad is that if you want to achieve great things, surround yourself with great people. So I've taken that with me in terms of the business world. So in regards to looking at keeping them interested, get them involved in as many commercial conversations as you can. Give them visibility around the strategy. They want to understand what they're doing now and how that adds value to the organisation. And you'll soon see who that's gelling with and who that's not motivating. So if it's not motivating them, they're probably more a person that needs a high degree of certainty and therefore a great employee. And you need great employees, but if you're looking at an exit option, you need drivers. So you need those people that are interested in where this organisation is going. So listen to what they're asking you.
Okay, so one of the things there is where's the organisation going? And one of the things I know, talking with different business owners, and if you drill down particularly some of their employees, is they don't actually know where it's going, or it's not communicated very clearly where it's going. So how would you structure, or how would you go about structuring some kind of development path?
I think the development path, Jason, is the easy. That's the how. Clarifying the why is the piece that needs the work up front. There's lots of ways you can develop people. You can mentor them, you can provide them with a buddy, you can just get them off the tools, so to speak, so get them out of the doing as much as you can and get them along to different seminars. There's a great program that Hunt and Ed are about to run called the Future Leaders Program, so there's lots of different development streams available, but you first of all need to know what you're developing. So you've got to identify that skill gap, and often when it's transitioning from someone who's very good operationally to a leader role, it is developing their vision, it's developing their strategy, it's giving them the skills for them to inspire and drive engagement with the other people around them. So the how is the easy part. There's lots of different avenues available, and it's really not a question of how large your business is. It's just about thinking a little bit out of the box and looking at what budget you have available. Doesn't have to cost a lot.
One of the things that I've noticed for many years, lawyers and accounting firms have a pretty well established, or appears, hierarchy or development path. And I was thinking it'd be useful, doesn't apply, not every single specific bit might apply to all our businesses, but I think there could be something gained there. Do you just want to share, Steve, a bit in terms of criteria and how you guys do it?
Yeah, sure. I think picking up on Lyndell's points around transparency and openness, I guess what we've always done is been very transparent and open about our strategy, and to the extent where, one, we roadshow our strategy each year in terms of where is the organisation heading. We look at that and break that down into our different 6 lines of business. And within that radar lock, we actually publish in 3 years' time where do we view our number of partners will be in those areas, so that younger people that have an aspiration for a career path towards partnership can see, they do the maths in their own head. E.g., well, they're saying we want 4 partners in business services, we've only got now 2, so there's clearly a career path option there for me to aspire to something and the like. I think secondly is each quarter then we update that. So in front of the whole team, pull the team together and say, look, we're either on track with that strategy or we've changed tact a little bit because of A, B and C. But for us, it's always been about that engagement piece and making sure that the people in your organisation that have an aspiration to be, more than just an employee, that they can clearly see that path and understand, where that path will look and within what time frame that might happen for them. I think then if you bring that back down, it's then about providing some mechanisms by which you can flesh out or identify who are those likely candidates that maybe we think also have the skills and capability to aspire to be that. And yes, we all do the traditional 6 monthly performance reviews and so on, but we've created a couple of little other things within the business just to try to flesh that out. So over the last couple of years, we've run sort of 2 concepts. One's called a think tank concept, and really that's just an area where anyone in our organisation can come forward and identify, look, I think, or I see, or have you thought about, and we put a reward up for that each quarter. And really the purpose of that is not so much, there's some great ideas, don't get me wrong, that come out of that, but what we're trying to do is to identify those people that clearly are starting to think, act and want to be a leader in their organisation. And for that just helps us drag out of the pool maybe those people that are a bit more aspiring to be that way. The second thing we've done is incorporate what we call an innovation forum. And so once we identify, I guess, those people that are starting to think, act, feel like they've got aspirations to be a leader, is actually to get them mixing in with the current leaders of the organisation a few times a year, where they can have their say, they can influence the future strategy of their area of the business that they operate in. And again, it's just part of that process of starting to, I guess, one, understand the chemistry test. Can we actually all work with these people as potential partners and owners? But equally, it's an opportunity for those guys to understand, well, how does some of that decision making around strategy happen?
Yeah, okay. And with that, in terms of, so somebody joins, obviously you're putting them into a specific role, they're applied for a job, they've got the job. Is this sort of stuff communicated then, as they go along, they pick it up? Is it?
Yeah, it depends on what level obviously they come in at, but I would say once they've sort of got beyond their first few years, so in our case they're sort of heading towards a supervisor style role, certainly a part of the review process and certainly the 30-day check-in is that we have quite clear pathways documented. So it says, well, if you want to go from being e.g. a supervisor to a manager now, here's the pathway. So it's actually flow charted out for them. It identifies for them, look, these are the 5 key things in a competency sense that we're after. Usually when you start talking leadership, it's not so much about their technical ability. Sure, that's important in our game, but leadership's about how they manage people, how they relate to clients, etc., etc. So the pathways spell it out for them. And as they go further up the tree, I'd say that those pathways become sort of a lot more clearer in respect of check-in points where we can agree to disagree that we're either wasting each other's time in the sense that, look, we know you've got the aspiration and we've all tried, but the reality is, it's not going to get there. And so I think, again, that's just part of our culture of transparency, of being able to clearly articulate the pathway and them being able to be open and honest, and likewise the employer to say it's working or it's not.
Okay, thank you. Does everybody have pathways planned in their business? Lovely, clear, something maybe yellow brick?
Yellow brick.
Oh, yellow brick, okay. It's certainly something to consider. What I find interesting with that is it seems very deliberate. It's not something that's just happening by chance. Neville, I know you've had enormous experience in a whole variety of ranges. I'm not sure, I'd really encourage everyone, if you haven't already, go on to Ampcontrol's website, hit the history button and just have a look through the development from 1968 to now. It's actually really inspiring, and it's quite impressive, where obviously this was quite but probably the main thing is that there was constant change. And so, mate, I'd imagine there's a couple of points where it would have got pretty tough to control this. And so I thought, and again, I suppose it didn't seem as if things just happened by chance, all the planets aligned, gee, you were awfully lucky, that kind of stuff. In relation to this driving growth from within, in the last decade, a lot of your leaders have come from within the team. Do you just want to touch on how that came about? Or?
Yeah, sure. Can I just go back a bit? Many of you in the room here will be business owners, or you're shareholders and you have a partner or maybe a couple of partners. Let me say that the first and foremost thing you have to do is agree with your partner on what the future is. Now that partner could be your wife or your spouse, and I can tell you in my mentoring role, which I do now, that's the most difficult thing. It's easy once the partners agree on what 5 years from now should look like, what they want to do. The ladies, I can tell you, want to have their groceries paid for, want to have a new car, want to have their kids educated. Okay, it's pretty simple. Unfortunately, they don't tell their partner that. And he wants to grow the business, wants to travel the world, and wants to sell out for $5 million. Those two things don't mix. It's very, very important. I can tell you, I've mentored something like 50 companies over the last 10 years, and I've only had 2 or 3 where the man and his wife, or 2 men or 2 women, have actually talked to one another about the future in 5 years. It's rare. And it's the hardest thing to get them to sit down and open up and say, well, this is my aspiration. This is what I think the business needs to do for me. Now, if you haven't done that, for God's sake, start immediately. You do need to reach a compromise. In my instance, we started in business, there were 4 people. The first one, this is in 1968, the first one left in 1972, the next one left before he turned 40 because he didn't want to do the same thing after he was 40, so that was in the late 70s. And Peter Cochrane and myself were there, and we sat down in 1982 and said, well, what do you want to do? So we'd already been in business for 14 years, we never asked one another that question. And then I decided, my wife and I decided that I wanted to retire at 60. Okay? I wanted to retire at 60. Did Peter want to buy me out or not? All those sorts of things. Actually put it on paper. Then you've got something to work for. And that bit of paper can be shown to other people in your management team so that they understand in their own mind of where this company is going and therefore the opportunities they have. Okay? Now, to get them involved, as both the other speakers have said, leaders show themselves easily in the workforce. They have respect from others. They are continually asking questions, why are you doing it this way? Why haven't you thought about that? Or I've had an idea, can I talk to you about it? It takes a little while for them to get comfortable, but after they've been with you for 6 months, this is what should be happening. And if they are doing that, then you need to decide how you're going to develop that. Most people employed by all of you have a technical background. Science, engineering, metallurgy, something of that nature. Many people, when they come out of TAFE or the university think that's going to be their lives, particularly their parents who have paid for the course. But that's not the way it is. In 5 years after graduation, you should be a supervisor. In 10 years after graduation, you should be a manager. And if you're going to go that path, and you're going to work for someone for the rest of your life, your education changes. You need to look at things outside of the technical area, because the other people coming through will be your technical ears and eyes, and also your hands. Your job is supervising them and getting the best out of them and forming teams. So the education process for you when you identify a leader is to get them to think outside the square and to do something that's got absolutely nothing to do with their technical skills. May I say, as an engineering organisation, the hardest thing that I ever had to do was get engineers to understand what a cash flow was. It's absolutely imperative that we're able to invoice things no later than the 25th of the month. And if I went out of the workshop and said, what's gone wrong with this? And someone said, oh, you know, we got to open the wrong tin of paint and painted it grey instead of green. It takes another 2 days to do that. Listen, fellas, I don't care what colour it is, but we've got to invoice no later than the 25th. Right? So these are the basic things that you've got to get through the minds of people who move into the supervisory and into the management stream. They must have that basic understanding of what drives the business and the things that are important to the business, not just the technical bit or the commercial bit or whatever it is. The other things that make the whole of the business. Identifying people who are prepared to do that is not difficult. Getting them to do it is more difficult. Getting them to succeed at doing it is the hardest bit. They don't need to pass with straight A's or with honours. They just need to pass. Not everyone wants to be a doctor of this or a doctor of that. What you need is people that have the understanding, full understanding, and can do it. Not people that are going to theorise about it. Right? So that's that bit. How do you get people together to work? The thing is to involve them in your strategic plans. Our first strategic, we've been in business 20 years before we involved our staff involved in setting a strategic plan. That was 10 years too late. We should have done it much, much earlier. Because as soon as we did that, we got their thoughts, because they've been in the business for 10 years or 5 years or whatever it was. They told us all the things that were wrong. We thought we knew everything was wrong, but that didn't work. But the important thing is to let them have their say, to have many of the things they suggest be put in the strategic plan, and then delegate that down so that they run the strategic plan, so that they form their teams. So that you might have 5 or 6 people with you and your partner, or just you, doing the strategic plan, and then you delegate down so that everyone in the company, are way down into the area of supervision, is involved. And you set timetables. And that's the job of the general manager or owner. Set timetables so that every 3 months or every 6 weeks, you sit down and say, what are you up to? And they say, oh, I don't have time to do that. Well, you're committed to do this. This is the way. You know, we need to be at this end in 2 years' time. Unless you do this in a 3-month period, we're not going to get there. So you find out whether the people can organise themselves, can dedicate themselves to the task, can get others to work with them to achieve the task. One of the other things I found very essential is that not everyone makes the grade. So you need to set the standards when you start. If you say, we're going to need a general manager for this, or a manager for this, or a development manager, whatever it is, they're the roles we want to fill over this next 2-year time. Who's interested in looking at that? Ask them to put their hand up. Who would like to have a go at doing it? Ask them to put their hand up. The crunch to get them to go to do that and say, if it's not successful after 6 months, you can go back to your existing job with no animosity. You still have a job with us, you don't have to leave. That's very, very important. In fact, every strategic plan we did at Ampcontrol over the last 25 years, we involved up to 10 people in the management team. And I can tell you we had 1 or 2 that were outstanding, we had 3 or 4 that were average, and we had 3 or 4 that failed. And they just went back to their previous jobs. They were very happy and stayed another 10 years. Very important not to lose that expertise. When you work for big companies, if you don't succeed, you go out the door. In private enterprise, You can't afford that. Good talent is hard to come by, particularly in this region. So allow people to go back and feel comfortable. And this is why it's very important to have the partner of those people on side. As soon as you think about promoting someone, you need to have their partner in the conversation. You need to say, John has this opportunity to move from there to there, but this is what's involved. Why don't you go home and talk about it and come back and tell me what you want to do? Don't promote someone before you do that. Disaster after disaster after disaster. I can tell you, getting phone calls from ladies who are saying, where is John today? He should be home at 5:30, we have dinner at 6. I say, sorry, he's in Tamworth, he's not leaving there for another 2 hours to come home. I've had so many of those phone calls all the time, and from all over the world, with people. I've been over the world and others are ringing me. So these little things are very, very important when you're running your own business. It's very important when you're running anyone's business. But that communication between you as the managing director or as the operations manager, whatever it is, with the people under you that you're trying to bring up is absolutely vital. And you should not be concerned if wives or partners ring you up and say, I've got this problem. You need to listen. You don't need to give an answer. You can say, I'll think about that. It's not necessary to answer straight away, even when they come in and knock on your door. It's not necessary. I'll think about that. I'll come back to you in a couple of days. It's always better to think about it than spread, allow the mouth to run off. So there's a few things that I think, can help. And I've probably had a 60 or 70% success rate, I think. I think that's pretty good. And I just emphasise that sitting down and actually putting it on paper is the most important thing. You can change it any time. You don't have to go a year before you review it. Things happen in the marketplace. Economic things change, and you immediately change that plan and the KPIs and the list.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Neville. Some really good stuff there, don't you think? Is everybody talking with their staff? Is anybody, Steve, how involved are your staff in, because you guys have had a lot of growth, different mergers and so forth?
In varying ways, we have weekly management meetings or team leader meetings, so there's a lot of communications about where we're headed, what we're doing. We have monthly staff update, where we let them know how the business is travelling, particularly over the last 2 years when it's been somewhat difficult.
Yep.
And at any stage, they're able to ask questions about how we're tracking. That's certainly within Advotech itself. Within the other companies that are slightly smaller, it's probably a different approach because they're much more intimately involved on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. And is there anyone who's having any difficulties? Anyone who's thinking, gosh, it's hard to motivate a team, or how do I start doing this? Or friends? That's great. So everyone's got it right. Let's go straight to the bricks. Now, I was wondering as well, I mean, you've done a lot of things with startups and emerging, tech companies and so forth more recently. What are those sort of companies doing to drive growth from within, in your view? Or is there some commonalities that you see?
The commonalities are that everyone thinks their idea is the best idea the world's seen. And of course it's going to be an absolute smash hit. And all I need is $100,000 to make that happen. Generally speaking, that doesn't work. But the important thing is to take the people with the idea and to sit them down and talk very sensibly and quietly and take them through the process of actually achieving and making a successful business. They are very good at what they do, but 99% of them have never even controlled the money in their home. Their wife has done that. And many of you around here, that might be the case. So it's very important with entrepreneurs and with innovators to get them to understand that the business runs on money and you can churn it and burn it very easily. And therefore you've got to set a plan on how you go about taking it from the idea to the development stage, to the trial stage, and then to the commercial stage. And they are distinct differences, as they are distinct models that you need to look at and support that you need. So in that mentoring role, you need to have a good network of people that you can call on, who will come in and give their time for free, or give 2 hours for free and then charge some figure, and then be a mentor for them as they move down the path. I can say the hardest people to deal with, who are innovators, are university people who, because they have the university bureaucracy behind them, think in university terms. They never want to give the IP away. They don't want anyone to make money out of it, and they want to make millions. And the hardest things I've ever done is negotiate with universities to try and get a very sensible contract arrangement where the intellectual property will pass to the people who come in and invest money over a period of time. And that is absolutely essential. Without that, you just don't touch it. So it's just one of those things you have to do. I think many people, particularly in the medical things, I've been involved with 3 medical startups, medical devices startups, and they want to use Cochlear or ResMed as their example. But when you go into the internet and trace the history of those 2 organisations, you see it's taken 15 to 20 years for them to get there. And when you put that down in front of the entrepreneur, even though they might have been in the university for 7 or 8 years, and they've got a model built and they've tested it on the bench, they still don't understand that you've got another 10 years to go. And in general terms, I can tell you about a couple I'm involved in Newcastle now. People have come out of BHP research out through the university, and they've been running for 7 years. And we've just recently had a discussion with Hatch Engineering in Brisbane about doing the engineering requirements for this. And Hatch management have said, well, you've got another 5 years to go before it's commercial. So that 10 to 15 years is about right, from idea to reality. There's just no shortcut. And you just have to have funding to be able to do it. So your story to get that funding has to be sensible, practical, and good. And people like Grant and I over here, who sit on Hunter Angels, we hear some whoppers.
Jason, I was wondering, mate, you deal with a lot of companies, obviously, and, many cases where they've got some issues or they're just wanting to improve. You hearing some common sort of things, mate?
Yeah, I really like what Neville said about engineers understanding cash flow. We used to run quarterly sessions with our whole 600-person workforce, where I'd walk them through the P&L. And it took 18 months before, of the same format, the same fonts and everything, as we gradually got them to understand what it meant and how it worked, and then it starts to click. And it makes a difference when everyone starts to get the message that you're talking about money, and every single day they used to see how much we sold.
Yeah.
And if you're not talking about money, there's no way. The goal of this is to make money. There's no way your workforce can align to that unless you talk about money. You can't talk about units or tree hugging or anything else. You can't talk about money at the object of the business.
Yeah.
So yeah, some real combination of that. I really love what a couple of you, 3 of you said about identifying the leaders by being the ones who ask questions. So the shit at the kid, he always goes, why? That's the early signs. I've got 3 of them. Types, right? But that's the signs of someone who's actually aspiring and looking to go higher or broader or both about what they see as the role, not just turning up to clock in and punch out.
I could just add one other thing that we did at Ampcontrol in the 90s for the first time. Every time we got a job in that required manufacturing, most of manufacturing jobs took a number of months, so they weren't component products. So anything that took more than a calendar month to make, we actually had barbecue on a Friday afternoon every 2 weeks, so twice a month. And we put up on a blackboard the actual printout from a computer of the profit and loss on that job. Everything from hours to component choose to plus hours, minus hours, etc. And encouraged everyone to look at it. And we had the product manager or the workshop manager or the design engineer there to answer questions at the time. And 2 weeks from that, we had it up again. I can tell you, it changed the attitude of the union people in the workforce dramatically. It took a year for them to come on board and understand that wasting hours was costing them bonus. Doing the right thing in all those hours where possible got the bonus. But it took that long for them to understand that if we were running at a loss, we had to pay for it. And we couldn't get it from the client, so who do we get it from? It took it out of the other profits of the company, and that reduced their bonus. So it's simple things like that that bring the workforce around. And I think, excuse me, it's just as big a thing for the management team and the engineers and the design people and the drawing office people as it is for the people on the workshop floor. Because I can tell you about 70% of the problem areas are in the design process. Things and drawings that go to the floor, the blokes start to make it, they find out it doesn't work right. Now you've got to reduce that 70% down to something like 10%. And by doing this sort of thing, enables you to do that, because they start to talk, look, it's not us that have done that, it's here. And you find out that you can make it. So being open and transparent on the number of hours used, the number of hours you've quoted, the overtime work, the components, costs, all that sort of stuff is absolutely vital.
Just to add to that, a couple of fabrication companies we've worked with, once they started sharing the hours they quoted, people making the stuff saw it as a gain.
Good.
And we're going to beat that.
Yeah.
Lee, you had a question?
Our
as well?
original start was about, how to position your business for sale. Do you do it within or do it outside? And given that I'm one of those gurus that managed actually to sell a business for a lot of money, and technically I'm retired except I keep working because I love it, but some of the messages that we've got up the front are really the basic core is really good communication and engaging and connecting with your staff. And most of us don't actually come from a culture of that. There's been management teams and management does management, people on the ground floor do the hard yards, and somewhere in the middle there's something, but who knows what that is. If you really want to set up a business where you either have your current employees take the responsibility of your business when you want to retire, or if you want to sell it to someone else, if you don't get that staff engagement right, you really don't have anything. Because if you're the guru up front, you're the profile, you do all the stuff, you're known, you're it, nobody's going to want to buy you. So those messages up the front about how you do it and how important it is that you do it, and some of the mechanisms of doing it are absolutely the critical aspect, because it may be your business and your responsibility, but when someone is going to buy it, whether it's from within or from without, you're not important because you're going to step away. So if you don't have those people right and part of the business, you really don't have a business to sell. And that's where a lot of companies are struggling right now, wanting to sell their companies, but haven't positioned themselves right. So great communication, staff engagement, and being flexible in that process is the critical bit. So everything those blokes have said, and you, of course, you're
Thank
one
you,
of them
Lee.
right
Thank
now.
That's a big
Everybody up
compliment.
front has actually us all a lot of those things, and that's the way you can sell a business at the end of the day and step away from it. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to get anyone who wants to buy it.
I mean, just around that, you're talking culture really. You might want a commercial outcome, but you have to have a good culture to support getting a commercial outcome. And one of the highest intrinsic motivators of people is trust and creating autonomy. So by sharing financials and allowing people to understand what drives a business and getting outcome and how what I do affects results is a great way to start to foster, if you're not already, to foster the culture that will hopefully give you the best commercial outcome. And there's people that will engage with those conversations, and they're the ones you have the spotlight on. And there's ones that will opt out of that, and that's okay, because you do need a quorum of people who do clock in and clock out, but when they're there, they're doing a great job. But you're looking for those ones that ask the questions, that are interested to know, and that's the ones that you will be ticking that they've got the, what we call in a recruitment sense, not the can-do piece, because you can train that, but they've got the will-do and will fit. They've got the values and the intrinsic motivators that you're looking for to allow you to step away.
And I think just adding to that, the other thing that a lot of business owners make the mistake of is that they don't listen to those people that are making the noises. And often there's this fear in business that someone making the noise is down at this level, yet there's a hierarchy above them that maybe aren't making the noise. And so there's a fear to develop that talent for them to jump in front of the next level. And Neville, you would have seen it more than anyone, but how many times do you see someone exit a business and set up their own, directly competing with where they came from, that could have been the right talent to end up as the next generation leader or etc. So I think one of the things to be not fearful of is upsetting those that we think are maybe the next generation leaders, because there's this young gun champing at the bit to be that next leader and over. So.
My goal is my team to make me redundant.
Yes, right. Yours too.
Yeah.
Ray Edwards is my name, from Corporate Partners. It's interesting discussion. I mean, we deal with medium to large companies all around the country implementing lean manufacturing and processes, and at the end of the day, we sit down with the CEO and he says to me, you know what, my problem's not all the clever stuff, it's my leadership. It's always the leadership. So even for the smaller businesses, if you're going to develop the potential and future leaders in your business, you need to be a good leader yourself. Because otherwise you're going to lose those good people. They'll go elsewhere, they're just saying. And how do we then teach technical people or line leaders, supervisors with good technical skills to do their job, to be good mentors of their people? And that's always the task. So if we go into a business, I know Jason will have the same thing, we walk around a manufacturing site, straight away it tells you the quality of the leadership. And very often we're looking down and saying those bastards down there don't do a good job, and then you're looking the other way and say, am I a good leader? Do I understand how to engage people, respect them, communicate to them, and make sure they have a good day at work, and we give them, we recognise their efforts. We just say thank you. And one of the tasks of our managers when we start working in business is say, when did you go and tell someone did a great job? How do you know if they did a great job? And we don't often have those tools and processes in place. So we need to actually do that and then teach people how to engage with their staff, communicate, thank you. And then teach them all the technical stuff. That's the easy side. I think that's the easy side of the technical stuff. That's the people stuff. It's the hardest, but it starts with the senior management team. A lot of us here are all in our businesses. So it sort of starts from us. That's the challenge we've got to make.
Yes,
I want to play just a quick devil's advocate. Sometimes you've started the business, you've got the passion, you're great about building it, doing it, but you're actually not good at some of these things, i.e. engaging with your staff in the right way. I think you were talking about the early stages of positioning your business. One of the things you've really got to do very critically is you've got to look, if you are the owner or if you're the general manager and if you're the one responsible, you really need to be critical about your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, my way, I'm a dictator personality. It's my way or the highway. And people, in the early days, I wanted everyone to love me, but somewhere along the line I recognised that I'm actually not that lovable in an employment environment, because I want everyone to do what I want done and I want it done my way. And I was never going to be the kind of model that Neville was describing, and I aspired. I mean, Neville was my, guru. I wanted to be like Neville. But I don't have that personality, and I wasn't able to do that. So I actually had to find someone else to do that for me. And it's not a weakness. It's actually a strength when you recognise what you're really good at. Step away and let someone else to do the things that you actually are not good at. Because otherwise, it gets very untidy.
Just for 1 second on that point, I think actually Neville, on a brief chat we've had, it seems there's a commonality with exactly what you're saying, Lee, where you need to have a reasonable level of humility. And mate, could you just quickly touch on, this wasn't always just you and your business partners, was it? You got in a lot of external consultants
Yeah.
to help
Yes,
in the areas you identified.
That's right. I think, excuse me, I think when our first of our four partners left us in 1972, we started in 68, left us in 72, there was a hole because he had an expertise in a particular thing. And we had to find someone to fill that hole. So three of us sat down and said, which one of us is going to do it? We didn't say, well, will we go outside and find someone? So we split up the things that this gentleman did and divided it between the three of us and took forward further to do it. That worked all right for about 18 months, but then at the end of 18 months we realised that we'd all given away those things and they got stuck into a drawer and we hadn't covered that at all. So we had to go outside and find someone. And it was skills in radio communication, which we didn't have. We were all electrical engineers. So we went out and found our first person and brought them into the company and incentivised them to build that up to where it was before and to then become a leader in the company. In addition, with just three of us, because we had similar outlooks and engineering was our profession, we decided we should have some law and some finance knowledge. So we went out and found two people to come and sit in as directors in the company. And the first year was absolutely horrendous as these two blokes quizzed us and said, why are you doing that? Why are you spending money on? What's your core? What's your core? And we were just out there getting business, growing it. And a bit like when HunterNet started, everyone did everything. Everyone was in HunterNet at the start, drill holes, cut plate, everything. We finally worked out that someone else was good at that, we should just do this bit. Well, in Ampcontrol, it took us a bit of time to do that as well. But these two outsiders, who were 20 years older than us, really made us focus. So at the end of 18 months, where they'd been on our board, and we had a board meeting every 3 months, they used to come with an A4 page of all these things that they'd seen in the operational information, and absolutely grilled us. Just as well we had a bottle of port and a dozen beers on the table, because it used to get pretty horrendous. But that was the greatest thing we'd done in the first 5 years of our business, was bring someone in from outside. They didn't get paid much. They didn't get paid anything. They were just interested, people who'd been in business for themselves, interested in helping us, and we had been guided to look for them through the various associations. So that was very, very important. As we progressed, we needed someone with mining management expertise, because we were at the nuts and bolts end of this, but we didn't have anything of the geography and the geological stuff of mining. And our idea in the 70s was to produce a range of equipment that would keep the plant running, reduce the operating costs of the plant, reduce injuries. That was the aspirational goal of what we wanted to do. So we had to work on how we could do that. We needed to understand mining better than the mining people. So we found people out who had retired early or been injured and came in and actually worked with us 2 and 3 days a week to give us that expertise and train people and so on. As we moved into new markets, for instance, we started to do business with New South Wales Railways, and that was a brand new market for us. So we employed someone out of the railways and they came and worked for us for 2 years while we understood the railway system, their communication system, which is what we were about, and also their signalling system. So outside expertise is very important. You can get them, you can come in on a contract, or they come in on a payoff, nothing up front. If we achieve this in a year's time, we'll give you this. We sent people on holidays to Fiji, which was the payoff, things like that. It didn't have to be money, it just needed to do something.
But Neville, you also, my understanding is that when there was that excuse me, that point in time with growth, you brought in some external people, and remember those 5 people from a management side, you sort of went, right, this is the team.
Yes,
So you were doing that the whole time.
that's right. We were doing that the whole time. We basically, at the start of the 80s, we had 7 operating companies in the Hunter. One doing projects, one doing switchgear, one selling, another one doing electronics, etc., etc. And we found that we were unable to win government contracts because each of the companies was too small and we didn't have the financial balance sheet that was necessary. So we immediately said, we'll put them all together and put all the financials together. We started to do that in 1982 and finished in 1989. It took that long. It took that long because we had managers in every one. We had to get them all to understand what was happening, and we brought people in to help us do that. We employed a person from ABB, secondly a person from Rio Tinto, etc. And these came in on contracts of 2 and 3 years and helped us achieve things. Okay? So by 1989, Ampcontrol was in existence with 4 divisions instead of 7 companies. And that's all worked. The other particular thing that I need to say is that you need to give those people in your company that they look like leaders the opportunity to prove it. And how did we do that? Terry Lawler, who at that stage was our accountant, absolutely hammered Peter Cockbain and I in the 80s because we were not involved in the community. We weren't on the Chamber of Commerce, we weren't involved in Engineers Australia, we weren't involved in AIG or any of this. We kept our head down because we'd been lumbered by the unions in the 1970s, and we decided no more public face. Terry talked us into doing something about that, and I became involved in the chamber movement and in AEMA. Peter became involved in the Institution of Engineers, etc. Now we did that because we were pushed into doing it, but it also gave us the opportunity for us to talk to people outside of the region who became our peers in other parts of Australia. We were able to ring up and say, I've got this problem, have you had this problem before? That was because we weren't comfortable dealing with our competitors in the Hunter. Now, what did that do? That meant we went here, we went there, we travelled. So when we were away from the company, other people in the management roles had to make the decisions. After the first year of travelling, I said to them, don't ring me and send me faxes, you make the decision. Make it and we'll worry about it when we get back. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, we'll talk about it. That forced our managers to take the roles, and we used to go away for 4 and 6 weeks at a time. Right? So one of us was away every 3 months for 4 or 6 weeks, and the next one was away every 3 months for 4 or 6 weeks. That forced the management team to understand what management of the company was about. And the biggest problem was always human relations, them stepping from the role of supervisor or foreman into the management role, because everyone took advantage of it. Okay? And that became a thing all through Ampcontrol's growing period, and right up until I retired at the end of 2005. So I think you've got to give the people the opportunity. You come back, you sit down and say, how'd you go with this, etc., etc., etc. Well done, well done, well done. Maybe you should have thought about it this way.
Thank you. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, Boyle, Jason and I strike this conversation. This is about driving growth and that, but we're now talking to guys running companies that say, we're now imploding, we're under serious stress, nobody in our organisation has been through this before. Now I'm looking at Neville, that's actually a bit older than me, and has probably been through it about 3 times. I think Steve's probably had to. The leaders in the growth period are not necessarily those that can take you through the pain.
No.
Would you like to talk about that, Neville?
Yeah, sure. When Bob Kirkby was in Newcastle running BHP, he'd come from Utah coal. Okay, so he was a mechanical civil engineer, and before he came to Newcastle, he was in the Pilbara, so he'd never seen a steelworks before he arrived. And when he came here, his job was to close BHP down, stop the steelmaking. And being involved in the business chamber and chamber of manufacturers, I went to see him and made an appointment, etc. Anyway, we became quite good business friends. And he told me the hardest thing he ever did was teaching his managers how to run a company in a downturn. The hardest single thing. Of course, none of his managers, are all in their 30s, had ever been through a downturn before. And even when he became the vice president of BHP and went to Melbourne, he still insisted that was the hardest job that managers in the company had, to train their people to go through a downturn. And I think that's why cash flow and the basics of finance and the basics of keeping things so that they flow through the factory so you can get invoicing is just so important, so very important. And in our experience, we had a downturn in the 70s, one in the 80s, the early 90s, and then of course during the Howard years. So we had to do some pretty drastic things. But the management and the directors were the first ones to take the hit. So the first thing we did was get all the management team together and said, Neville, Sawyer and Peter Cockbain are going to take a 50% pay cut for the next year. We'd like you to offer to do the same. Not 50%, talk it over with your wife, come back and tell me what you're prepared to do. None of our directors got paid for a year. Peter and I took that pay cut. We had our management team, which was about 15 at that time, come back and say, we'll take a 35% pay cut. We then went to our foreman and said, this is what we're doing. Do you all want to stay employed or do you want to go? The foreman took a 25% pay cut. Supervisors took a 15% pay cut. And we reduced the terminations of people by half. We did that 3 times in 30 years. It worked every time. At the end of the year, when things had improved, because this one's lasted a bit longer, end of the year, we paid everyone up and paid them an extra 15%. Their wives were ecstatic. The blokes were pretty happy too. But you've got to involve everyone. And you've got to keep your best people. You've got to get rid of the ones that are hangers-on. That's not to say that they're not good people, but you get more out of your people in bad times than you do out in good times.
Thanks, Neville. Look, we're pretty much out of time. I was going to ask our panellists a quick, a summary, like the best thing, the thing to avoid, but it'd be remiss of me not to ask you. There's a lot of expertise in the room within this peer group. Does anyone have a question that I'd hate for you to go home and go, gosh, I wish I got the opportunity to ask that question? Is everybody comfortable? Anybody? Yes, mate?
I'm the guy who's asking that last question. So.
You're right.
Just a question to the panel. Do you see it different now, maybe for you, Steve, with your workforce, maybe, or anyone on the panel, managing the different generations? Because the younger generations, now they're coming straight out of uni now and whatnot, their sense of loyalty or entitlement or wanting career changes regularly, etc. Talking about these building great teams and keeping people long term. Do you see that fundamentally different with generations today?
Yeah, look, the answer is yes and no. So yes, I think the expectations of the younger people when they come in are that they can advance much quicker and go into more senior positions maybe than even people in my era when we started with the company in terms of what was the road to get there. But no, in the sense of that, I think if you have the same principle and the approach that you take, which is all about here's the expectation on what's required to be a leader, here's the time frame within which we think is realistic, and being open and transparent about it, then certainly our experience has been you don't get that a different outcome. So for us it's always been about transparency in terms of that, and being able to call it when it's not working. And I think as long as you do that to all people, irrespective of their generation, certainly our experience has been that being able to sit down and have the discussion and go, look, we know you think you should be here and want to be there, but here's the 1 or 2 things that are the gap in you getting there. And that's been our model.
I'm a little bit like Steve. I think that the younger generations want it quicker, so their concept to delivery is probably shorter, but the drivers are still the same. So the fundamental human needs haven't changed. It's all about how much status they want, how much certainty they want, autonomy, how much do they want to feel part of the team, and how fair and equitable are they treated. So there's still 5 drivers, Paul, and we each have those in varying amounts at different stages of our life, depending on what's going on. So it's not generational. I think it's more around stage of life. And I think with Gen Ys, there is a perception that they want it all now, but that is because there's so much information that is so readily available for them. And I think that's the challenge in leading them, is being okay with the transparency level. But having the accountability framework to support that. So you've still got some really strong guardrails around what you expect, but it's being okay with the transparency. That's what they want, because they can Google it. Yeah.
Yes. I think on the internet, the money and the conditions look fantastic. In reality, it always looks better on the other side of the fence. So what you do have to have is a policy for them to come back to you. When I left Ampcontrol in 2005, 25% of our staff are people that had come back to us. Okay? I think it's very important that you're seen as a good trainer and give people opportunities. And never stop people from moving for an opportunity, even if it's outside. I think it's very important. Here in the Hunter, we have a lot of family-friendly conditions that people will come back to, particularly for education, for lifestyle. It doesn't take long. If you worked in Singapore or Hong Kong or New York, you realise that it's very different. And your wife and family might say, well, education in Australia is the thing to do. Now, Ampcontrol, I'm very proud to say that many of the people we've trained are now general managers and managing directors of other companies around Australia and overseas. But I still get Christmas cards from them every year. It's absolutely vital you should provide the opportunity for them to know how your company's going, and if they're interested in returning to the Hunter. Forget about returning to you, returning to the Hunter. Because they are gaining more experience out there.
Well, thanks very much, guys. I was just going to, in summary, just remind you, challenge what you're currently doing. One of the things I saw as the recent Hunter Valley Research Forum was James O'Loughlin from the New Inventors, and he actually said that it's a really smart thing to do, but very few people do this, to somewhere in your diary, probably on a Friday, put in 10 minutes. If you're a business owner or a manager, 10 minutes just thinking on your business. And if you manage to do that each week, you'll be vastly better off than if you don't do it. It's a smart thing, just as a sort of a stock take. It's a lot easier said than done. It's so easy to get caught up with a whole lot of other things. I'd like to, the other thing I was just going to say, as I mentioned before, doesn't seem there's anything here by luck or chance, is there? Everything's pretty deliberate. They're all thought through, implemented, and clearly things don't always go according to plan, and so you've got to be flexible. So I'd ask you to thank me, or thank with me, thank you, panelists.
Thank you again, and could I also thank our business value group in HunterNet, who put a lot of work in. They come up with topics that spend a lot of their time out of work helping HunterNet and our members. That's Jason Poole from GPO Matrix, Richard Herms is from Colourworks, of course Lyndell Fogarty from PerformHR, Simon Rutherford, who's an apology tonight, and Grant Sefton from Boyne Agnew. Thanks, guys. We're talking about future leaders tonight. Thanks for the plug.
Had your back.
This is about the 2015 HunterNet Future Leaders Program. This is hot off the press. I've got copies for everybody. Please have a read of it. It's something new to HunterNet. It's another chapter in HunterNet, and it's very. It sounds like the night's been a big plug for this, but I assure you it's not. But please have a look at this. It's very worthy as far as bringing your future leaders through. And it's something we've been working on for a while, so thanks very much, and thank you, Jason.
Cheers, Jason.